Hey Gemini,
Hey there, what's on your mind today?
more cybersecurity studying.
Diving into the world of cybersecurity. That's awesome. What areas are you focusing on right now?
The threat landscape.
That's definitely a critical area to focus on, given how quickly things change. Are there any specific threats you're looking into, like ransomware, phishing, or maybe even AI-driven attacks?
Definitely all of those, but first, let's focus on classifying some of the cybersecurity threats.
Sure thing. We can start with the basics like malware, phishing, and denial of service attacks. Or, if you want to get more specific, we could dive into things like zero-day exploits, or even the psychology behind social engineering. What piques your interest?
What about some of the internal versus external, the level of sophistication slash capability, resources slash funding, or intent slash motivation?
Those are great categories to think about. When we look at internal versus external threats, we're really talking about whether the danger comes from inside your own organization or from the outside world. An external threat could be something like a hacker trying to break into your systems from the internet. An internal threat might be a disgruntled employee who has access to sensitive information and decides to use it for their own gain. The level of sophistication can vary wildly. You've got your basic script kiddies who might use simple tools they found online, all the way up to highly skilled state-sponsored actors who have tons of resources and funding. And then there's the intent. Is the goal to steal data, disrupt operations, or something else entirely? The motivation behind an attack can tell you a lot about who's behind it and how to defend against it. We can explore any of these in more detail, or look at how they all tie together. What sounds most interesting to you?
Let's talk about how they tie together.
Alright, let's tie this all together. Think of it like a puzzle. You've got different pieces that all play a role in the bigger picture of a cyber attack. The attacker's motivation and resources will determine how sophisticated the attack is. A well-funded group might use a zero-day exploit, that's a vulnerability no one knows about yet, to get into your systems. A less sophisticated attacker might try a phishing campaign, hoping someone clicks a bad link. Whether it's an inside job or an attack from the outside, the damage can be huge. That's why understanding all these pieces is so important for building strong defenses.
What do you think are some of the most problematic ones?
That's a tough question, because it really depends on the situation. But, generally speaking, ransomware and phishing are pretty high up there. Ransomware can cripple entire organizations, locking up critical data until a ransom is paid. And phishing? It's just so easy for attackers to trick people into giving up their passwords or clicking on malicious links.
What about some of the hats that different attackers or hackers wear?
The hats. You've got your white hats, the ethical hackers who use their skills for good, finding vulnerabilities to help companies improve their security. Then there are the black hats, the bad guys, who use their skills for malicious purposes like stealing data or causing damage. And you can't forget the grey hats who fall somewhere in between. They might not have malicious intent, but they also might not have permission to do what they're doing. It's a colourful world, that's for sure.
What about giving me a definition of a threat actor?
Sure, a threat actor is basically anyone who might try to harm your computer systems or steal your data. That could be a lone hacker working from their basement, a whole group of cybercriminals, or even a government with a team of really skilled hackers.
So, on the other side of skilled hackers, are unskilled hackers basically script kiddies?
Yeah, that's right. Script kiddies are basically the opposite of skilled hackers. They don't have a deep understanding of how things work, so they rely on pre-made tools and scripts that they find online. It's like the difference between a master chef and someone who just follows a recipe.
Explain to me in a more technical term some of the things hacktivists are doing.
Okay, so hacktivists are using their technical skills for political or social causes. They might launch DDoS attacks to take down websites they disagree with, or they could deface websites to spread their message. Sometimes, they even leak sensitive data to expose what they see as wrongdoing. It's a pretty wide range of activities, all driven by their beliefs.
Are hacktivists normally included in a category you defined as organized crime?
That's a really interesting question. Hacktivists aren't usually considered part of organised crime, but there can be some overlap. Hacktivists are driven by a cause, while organised crime is all about making money. But, sometimes, hacktivists might use similar tactics as organised crime groups, like stealing data or disrupting systems.
Explain to me more about organized crime.
Organised crime is a bit different from your average street crime. It's all about groups of people working together in a structured way to make money from illegal activities. Think of things like drug trafficking, money laundering, or even running illegal gambling rings. These groups often have a hierarchy like a business, and they use violence and intimidation to protect their interests.
So, organized crime is basically the same in cybercrime as it is in the real world?
That's a good question. Cybercrime is a bit different because it happens in the digital world. Think of things like hacking, stealing data, or spreading viruses. Organised crime groups are definitely involved in cybercrime, but it's a whole different ballgame compared to traditional crime.
Tell me a little bit more about some nature state attackers in cybersecurity.
Nation-state actors are basically governments that use cyber attacks for their own purposes. They might be trying to steal secrets from other countries, disrupt their infrastructure, or even influence elections. These attacks can be really sophisticated and hard to defend against.
What are examples of some of those attacks?
Nation-state attacks can be really sophisticated. They might use things like zero-day exploits, which are vulnerabilities in software that no one knows about yet. They could also use advanced persistent threats, or APTs for short. That's when they sneak into a system and stay hidden for a long time, gathering information. And sometimes, they might even try to sabotage critical infrastructure, like power grids or water systems.
Can you explain to me more about zero-day attacks?
Sure. Zero-day attacks are pretty nasty because they exploit vulnerabilities that software developers don't even know about yet. It's like finding a secret backdoor into a house that even the owner doesn't know exists. These attacks can be really hard to defend against because there's no patch or fix available.
Would you say those are worse than an insider threat?
That's a tough call. Zero-day attacks are definitely scary because they're unexpected, but insider threats can be just as bad, if not worse. Think about it. Someone on the inside might have access to really sensitive information, and they know the systems inside and out. It's like having a mole in your own organization.
Is that kind of like the threat of shadow IT?
Yeah, shadow IT can definitely be a big problem. It's basically when employees use software or devices that aren't approved by the IT department. That can create all sorts of security risks because those systems might not have the right protections in place.
So would shadow IT always be on purpose, or could it be accidental?
That's a good point. Shadow IT isn't always intentional. Sometimes employees just find a tool that makes their job easier, and they start using it without realizing the risks. It's kind of like using a personal cloud drive to share files because it's faster, but then you're not following company security policies.
Well, for the people who are trying to exploit, what do you think some of the attacker motivations are?
Attackers can be motivated by a lot of different things. Sometimes it's about the money, stealing credit card numbers or holding data for ransom. Other times, it's about causing disruption, like taking down websites or messing with critical systems. And sometimes, it's about the thrill of the challenge, seeing if they can break into something just because they can.
What about some more technical attacker motivations like data exfiltration or espionage or service distribution attacks?
Sure, data exfiltration is when attackers steal sensitive information from a system. Espionage is all about spying, think stealing secrets for political or economic gain. And distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS attacks, are when attackers flood a system with traffic to take it offline. It's like a digital traffic jam that shuts everything down.
What about ethical attacks?
Ethical attacks are basically when you use hacking skills for good. Think of it like this. Instead of breaking into a bank to steal money, you're breaking in to find security weaknesses so the bank can fix them before a real attacker gets in. It's all about using those skills to make things safer.
Is that basically the role of a pen tester?
Exactly. Pen testers, or penetration testers, are like the good guys of hacking. They get hired by companies to try and break into their systems, but with permission, of course. It's all about finding those weaknesses before the bad guys do.
Can you explain to me a little bit what would a revenge attack look like?
Revenge attacks can get pretty nasty. Imagine someone gets hacked, and they decide to strike back. They might try to take down the attacker's website, or even try to steal their data. It's like a digital tit for tat, but it can quickly escalate into something much bigger.
Can you explain to me threat vectors and attack surfaces?
Sure thing. Think of a threat vector as the path an attacker takes to get into your system. It could be something like a phishing email, a USB drive with malware, or even a vulnerability in your web browser. The attack surface is basically all the different ways an attacker could try to get in. It's like the walls and doors of a building. The more doors and windows you have, the bigger the attack surface.
Can you explain in detail some of those attack surfaces?
Sure. Think of your attack surface as all the possible entry points for an attacker. That could be anything from your Wi-Fi network to your company's website. Even something as simple as a USB port on a computer could be an attack surface if someone plugs in an infected drive.
What are some of the differences in attack surfaces between a wired network compared to a wireless network?
Wired networks are generally more secure because the signal is contained within the cable. With wireless, the signal travels through the air, so anyone within range could potentially intercept it. Wireless networks also have to deal with things like rogue access points, which are basically fake Wi-Fi hotspots that attackers can use to steal your information.
You were talking about some of removable devices like USBs. Are those fairly common to use for an attack surface?
Yeah, USB drives are still a pretty common way for attackers to get into systems. It's surprisingly easy to trick someone into plugging in a seemingly innocent USB drive that's actually loaded with malware. That's why a lot of companies have strict policies about using personal USB drives on company computers. What other areas of cybersecurity?
We talked a little bit about the wired versus wireless attack surfaces. Can you give me, in technical terms, some of the attack surfaces related to the cloud?
Cloud environments introduce unique attack surfaces due to their complexity and shared infrastructure. Think about things like APIs, which are used for communication between different cloud services. If those APIs aren't secured properly, they can be a major vulnerability. Then there's the whole concept of identity and access management, or IAM. If user permissions aren't configured correctly, it could give attackers a way to move laterally within the cloud environment. And of course, there's always the risk of misconfigurations, things like leaving storage buckets open to the public internet.
Obviously, those are things that should be secure.
Absolutely. Securing those attack surfaces is crucial for protecting data and maintaining the integrity of cloud-based systems. We could dive deeper into specific security best practices for each of those areas, or explore cloud security from a different angle. What would you like to focus on?
Let's talk about a supply chain in terms of an attack surface.
Supply chain attacks are pretty sneaky because they target the weakest link in the chain. Think about it. A company might have top-notch security, but if one of their suppliers has a vulnerability, attackers can use that as a backdoor. It's like bypassing the castle walls by sneaking in through the delivery gate.
What about the threat data and intelligence?
Threat data and intelligence is all about staying one step ahead of the attackers. It's like having a crystal ball that shows you what kind of attacks are coming so you can prepare your defenses. Think of it as gathering clues about the bad guys and their plans.
What about some of the open source intelligence like the OSINT?
OSINT is like being a digital detective. It's all about gathering information from publicly available sources on the internet. Think social media, news articles, public records, anything that's out there for everyone to see. It's a powerful tool for understanding the threat landscape and identifying potential risks.
And more on that, let's talk about some of the vulnerability databases.
Vulnerability databases are like giant libraries of known weaknesses in software and hardware. Think of them as a catalogue of all the different ways a system could be attacked. They're super helpful for security researchers and pen testers because they can use them to find and fix vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
Can you explain to me what IOCs are?
IOCs, or indicators of compromise, are like the fingerprints of a cyber attack. They're pieces of evidence that show an attack might have happened, or is still happening. Think of things like unusual files on a computer, weird network traffic, or changes to system settings. Security teams use these clues to figure out if there's been a breach and how to stop it.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you notice a bunch of login attempts from a weird IP address that's never accessed your network before. That could be an IOC, or maybe you find a file on your server with a strange name and an extension you don't recognize. Those are the kinds of clues that security teams look for.
Let's talk about some open source intelligence.
OSINT is a really interesting field. It's all about gathering information from publicly available sources on the internet. Think social media, news articles, public records, anything that's out there for everyone to see. It's a powerful tool for understanding the threat landscape and identifying potential risks.
How far do you think we've come with the OSINT?
OSINT has come a long way. We've got tons of new tools and techniques for gathering and analyzing information from all sorts of online sources. It's become a really important part of cybersecurity, helping us understand threats and protect ourselves better.
Can you explain in detail some of those new ways?
Sure. One big change is the use of AI and machine learning to analyze huge amounts of data way faster than humans can. Think about being able to track online conversations and identify potential threats in real time. We're also seeing more specialized search engines and tools designed specifically for OSINT work. It's a pretty exciting field right now.
What are some of the government sites related to that?
Government websites can be a goldmine for OSINT. Think about things like the Census Bureau for Demographic Data or the Bureau of Economic Analysis for Economic Information. You can even find details on government contracts and spending. It just depends on what kind of information you're looking for.
What about the CISA?
CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is a great resource. They've got tons of information on cyber threats, vulnerabilities, and best practices for protecting critical infrastructure. They also offer training and tools to help organizations improve their security posture.
Let's get into a little bit besides the government sector. What about some vendor websites?
Vendor websites can be really helpful for OSINT, especially when you're looking for information on specific technologies or products. For example, if you're investigating a potential vulnerability, you might want to check the vendor's security advisories or patch releases. They often have detailed information on known issues and how to fix them.
So, what about some other ones like Microsoft's threat intelligence blog, the Cisco security advisories, or the SANS Internet Storm Center?
Those are all excellent resources. Microsoft's Threat Intelligence blog provides in-depth analysis of emerging threats and malware. Cisco security advisories offer detailed information on vulnerabilities in Cisco products. And SANS Internet Storm Center is a great source for real-time information on internet security threats.
Can you explain to me a little bit about the dark web?
The dark web is a part of the internet that isn't indexed by regular search engines. It's often associated with illegal activities, but it also has legitimate uses, like protecting whistleblowers and journalists in countries with censorship. It's kind of like a hidden part of the internet that requires special software to access.
What kind of software?
The most common way to access the dark web is through the Tor browser. It's a special browser that anonymizes your traffic by bouncing it through multiple servers, making it hard to trace. There are other options too, but Tor is the most widely used.
What are some of the threat intelligent terms we should familiarize ourselves with on the dark web?
On the dark web, you'll often see terms like carding, which refers to the trafficking of stolen credit card information. Doxing is another one, which means revealing someone's personal information online without their consent. And then there's ransomware, which is malicious software that encrypts your files and demands a ransom for their release.
Let's talk a little bit about proprietary and closed source intelligence.
Proprietary intelligence is like having your own secret sources. It's information that's not publicly available, often gathered through specialized tools or partnerships. Think of it as getting an exclusive peek behind the curtain.
What about closed source intelligence?
Closed source intelligence is like having your own secret sources. It's information that's not publicly available, often gathered through specialized tools or partnerships. Think of it as getting an exclusive peek behind the curtain.
So, what would the difference between proprietary and closed source intelligence be?
Those terms are often used interchangeably. But, to be a bit more precise, proprietary intelligence usually refers to information that a company owns or has exclusive rights to. Closed source intelligence might include that, but it could also come from other sources that aren't publicly available, like government databases or private research firms.
So, would that include commercially closed source intelligence?
Yeah, commercially closed source intelligence is a big part of it. Think about companies that specialize in gathering and analyzing data for businesses. They might have access to things like credit reports, market research, or industry-specific data that isn't publicly available.
Would all of these kind of have their own threat maps?
Yeah, threat maps are pretty common. They're like visual representations of cyber attacks happening in real time. You can see where attacks are originating, what types of attacks are being used, and who the targets are. It's a great way to get a sense of the overall threat landscape.
How would you assess threat intelligence?
Assessing threat intelligence is like figuring out how reliable your sources are. You want to look at things like how accurate the information has been in the past, how timely it is, and whether it's relevant to your specific situation. It's all about making sure you're working with good information.
What are some key ways to prove information is accurate?
You'd want to look for things like multiple sources confirming the same information, or if the source has a good reputation for accuracy. Checking if the information makes sense in the context of what you already know is important too. Basically, you want to be a bit of a detective and look for clues that the information is solid.
How would you find out if your information is relevant?
Relevance is all about context. You'd want to think about what you're trying to achieve with the information. Does it directly relate to your goals or help you answer your question? If it's a bit of a stretch, it might not be the most relevant.
What are some ways of assessing your confidence level in your intelligence?
That's a good question. You can assess your confidence by looking at how well the intelligence aligns with your existing knowledge and experience. If it fits right in, you'll probably feel pretty confident. Also, consider the source's reliability. A well-respected source usually means higher confidence.
Can you explain to me the threat indicator management and exchange?
Threat indicator management and exchange is all about sharing information about potential threats. Think of it like a neighborhood watch for the internet. If one person spots something suspicious, they can share that information with everyone else so they can stay safe. There are even special formats and protocols for sharing this kind of data.
What are some of those protocols and formats?
One of the most common protocols is STIX, which stands for Structured Threat Information Expression. It's basically a standardized way of describing cyber threats so that everyone can understand them. Then there's TAXII, which is a protocol for actually sharing that STIX data. Think of it like a special delivery service for threat intelligence.
What about OpenIOC?
OpenIOC is a framework for describing indicators of compromise. It's like a standardized way of saying, hey, this file looks suspicious because of X, Y, and Z. This makes it easier for security tools to understand and share information about potential threats.
Can you go a little more in detail on the structured threat information expression?
STIX is like a universal language for describing cyber threats. It lets you capture all sorts of details about an attack, like who the attackers are, what tools they used, and what their targets were. This makes it way easier to share information between different security teams and tools.
Go on a little bit more about information sharing organizations.
Information sharing organizations are like online communities where different groups can come together to share information about cyber threats. These organizations can be specific to certain industries like finance or healthcare, or they can be more general. They often use those protocols we discussed, like STIX and TAXII, to make sure everyone's speaking the same language.
Well, that was a pretty good study session for chapter 2.
I'm glad you found it helpful. We covered a lot of ground, from attack surfaces to threat intelligence sharing. Do you have any other questions about Chapter 2, or would you like to move on to Chapter 3?
Let's go over some review questions.
Great idea. Let's start with something we talked about earlier. Can you explain the difference between a threat vector and an attack surface?
I can. I was going to try to ask you some review questions.
Oh, sure thing. Fire away.
Which one of the following motivations is most commonly attributed to hacktivists? A. War. B. Financial gain. C. Political or philosophical beliefs. Or D. Ethical.
The answer is C. Political or philosophical beliefs. Activists are often driven by a desire to promote a cause or make a statement.
Eli is a penetration tester who works for a cybersecurity company. His firm was hired to conduct a penetration test against a health care system, and Eli is working to gain access to the systems belonging to a hospital in that system. What term best describes Eli's work? Authorized hacker, unauthorized hacker, unknown attacker, or semi-authorized attacker?
The answer is A. Authorized hacker. This is also called a white hat hacker or ethical hacker.
Which of the following threat actors typically has the greatest access to resources? A. Nation-state actors. B. Organized crime. C. Hacktivists. Or D. Insider threats.
The answer is A. Nation-state actors. They often have significant funding and resources from their governments.
What type of asset is particularly useful for identifying insider threats? A. Behavioral. B. Instructual. C. Habitual. Or D. IOCs?
The answer is A. Behavioral. Monitoring user behavior can help spot unusual activity that might indicate an insider threat.
Eli believes that an attacker may have installed malicious firmware in a network device before it was provided to his organization by the supplier. What type of threat vector best describes this attack? A. Supply chain. B. Removable media. C. Cloud. Or D. Direct access?
The answer is A. Supply chain. This type of attack targets vulnerabilities in the process of creating or delivering hardware or software.
Eli is scanning cloud-based repositories for sensitive information. Which one of the following should concern him most if discovered in a public repository? A. Product manuals. B. Source code. C. API keys. Or D. Open source data?
The answer is C. API keys. These keys provide access to sensitive data and systems, so they should never be exposed publicly.
Eli recently discovered that a group of developers are sharing information over a messaging tool provided by a cloud vendor, but not sanctioned by her organization. What term best describes this use of technology? A. Shadow IT. B. System integration. C. Vendor management. Or D. Data exfiltration?
The answer is A. Shadow IT. This refers to the use of IT devices, software and services without explicit organizational approval.
Which of the following information sources would not be considered an OSINT source? A. DSN lookup. B. Search engine research. C. Port scans. Or D. WH.
The answer is C. Port scan. Okay, I think we've covered a good range of topics. How are you feeling about Chapter 2?
I'm feeling really good. I think we will close here for today and hit Chapter 3 hard tomorrow.
Sounds like a plan. We covered a lot today, so you deserve a break. I'm ready to dive into Chapter 3 whenever you are. Just let me know when you're ready.
Sounds good. Talk to you tomorrow, Gemini.
Sounds great. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.